VeggieTale version of Esther. Go watch it. It is really a good story. It is well done. It presents it in a neat way, but it doesn't excuse you from paying attention. So, um, because what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going into this book in the Old Testament and looking at the story as one that is timely, one that's not trapped in the past. You see, the book of Esther it came forward to us from the time after the Israelites were taken into captivity. The Babylonians, they conquered the southern kingdom, right, Judah, and they took many of them into captivity in Babylon. Well, after they'd been there a little while, the Babylonian Empire fell to the Persian Empire. Persia was a more powerful entity. It was militarily more powerful, economically more powerful, and it was able to conquer the Babylonians and take up the rule that the Babylonians had over the Israelites. And that's when this story comes from. The Persians are in place. Now, the neat thing about the book of Esther is it's a real simple book. It's real short. It's only like 7 or 9 chapters, not much to it. But it has a really complex story in that there's a plot that goes all the way through it, but there are twists and there are turns and there are characters who really kind of come alive in the story. But there's one thing that kind of comes from the pages, and that is it speaks to things that are happening in our time. It speaks to things that are taking place right now that we can relate to. So, I'm going to start with Esther chapter 1. If you don't know where Esther is, go to the book of Psalms and take a left, okay? It's before Psalms. Esther comes back with Nehemiah. It comes back there before Job. It comes after the historical books of the Kings and the Chronicles. So, Esther is right there at the end of the history books. It's right there before the poetry books. Book of Esther, chapter 1. Now, in the days of Ahasuerus, the Ahasuerus, who reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces, in those days, when King Ahasuerus sat on his royal throne in Susa, the citadel, in the 3rd year of his reign, he gave a feast for all his officials and servants. The army of Persia and Media and the nobles and the governors of the provinces were before him, while he showed the riches of his royal glory and the splendor and pomp of his greatness for 180 days. And when these days were completed, the king gave for all the people present in Susa the citadel, both great and small, a feast lasting for 7 days in the court of the garden of the king's palace. And then it kind of goes on for the next few chapters telling about the setting and how things were handled. I want to pick up in verse 10. On the 7th day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, and Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcas, the 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of King Ahasuerus, to bring Queen Vashti before the king with her royal crown, in order to show the peoples and the princes her beauty, for she was lovely to look at. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command, delivered by the eunuchs. And at this, the king became enraged, and his anger burned within him. Will you join me in a spirit of prayer? Almighty and gracious God, a book that is over 2,000 years old is still a part of our life, connected to you. A book that tells us the story of a young girl and the role that she played among the powerful people of her age. A book that seems almost perfect for a modern television show and yet tells us of a life long ago. But also a book that tells us of what happened so long ago that informs our life today. So give us eyes to see and ears to hear in the story that is told to us of Esther, how we may live into your glory and your prominent place as King and Lord and Master. in this message, may my words be yours, that I would speak wisdom and truth. And may all of our hearts and minds and spirits be centered on you, the living God, who continues to nourish and feed us and bring us to growth and maturity as disciples of Jesus Christ. I pray these things in your name, Father, Son, and Spirit. Amen. When we open the book of Esther, it isn't until we get into the second chapter that we're introduced to the title character. So we have to get through some backstory, some setting of the scene to get to Esther. And that's what chapter 1 is about. It's all the backstory. It's the setup. We're introduced to this supporting character first, King Ahasuerus. Now, King Ahasuerus is also known as King Xerxes. He was the king of Persia. And like I said, Persia was this empire that swept in after the Babylonians, and it conquered that region of the world. You hear there in the opening verses that King Ahasuerus, King Xerxes, his kingdom went from India to Ethiopia. So pull up your mental map of the world. The southern expanse of Asia down into Africa, encompassing from India all the way through the stands, not Stan, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, all of those stands down through the Middle East into Africa. The Persian Empire encompassed all of that region. And King Ahasuerus, King Xerxes, was in control of all of this. Now, he had governors and he had provincial leaders, and that's who he invited to this party. Can you imagine holding a party for 180 days? Actually, 187 days. Imagine that. 187 days of hosting people, and really what was happening was he was bragging about everything. Because the verses that I skipped there in 6, 7, 8, 9, it's all about the grandiose setting of his palace. It talks about how everything was decorated. It talks about how people were served. It says that he had them drink from golden goblets. He was showing off. He was saying, this is how great I am. This is how rich I am. This is how powerful I am. And it says that at the end of that little party that he gave, it says he was a little tipsy. He was merry with wine. If that ain't tipsy, I don't know what it is. He was merry with wine. He was feeling kind of okay. He was kind of numb to a few things. And so as he's showing everybody, he says to those men, those eunuchs who served him and were able to go into the harem where he kept his wives, he said to these individuals, you all go get Queen Vashti. Tell her to put her crown on and come in and let everybody see how beautiful my wife is. And so we're introduced to Queen Vashti, really a background character, somebody who only appears a few times in this book. But in this chapter, it's very important to notice because this is the queen of Persia. The crown that she wears is the symbol of her office. The king says, go bring my queen so that everyone can see how beautiful a queen she is. Now, the story goes, Queen Vashti looked at these servants who came in and said, the king desires your presence, and she says, no. Simple as that. She refuses. And we read that the king became enraged. Not upset, not frustrated, enraged with Queen Vashti. So much so, with his anger burning within him, in the midst of his being tipsy, he turns to those leaders who are gathered with him, the governors and the provincial agents, and he says, what do I do? What do I do with this woman who will not listen to me? And one of them gets brave, probably because he was also merry with wine. and says, you know what you ought to do, King? You ought to kick her out. Take her crown away from her. Remove her from her place and move her on down the road. And Ahasuerus says, I wish I'd had a V8. Why didn't I think of that? So he makes a decree. Verse 22. He sent letters to all the royal provinces, to every province in its own script, and to every people in its own language, that every man shall be the master in his own household. Have you ever heard that phrase before? Every man's a master of his own house? As long as his wife said so. I've heard that probably all my adult life easily. I've heard that phrase said time and time again. Now, I'm not sure if you know what's happening around us as a culture. I don't know if you're aware of what is transpiring between male and females right now in the culture. There's a war between the genders happening. It's not an outright conflict between male and females, but what I have seen is there's been a concentrated attack by men on women. There is an attitude that I have seen in the American culture of men telling women that they do not have certain places within the culture that they are claiming. That they do not have a right to speak to certain things, and that really every man is a master in his own household. And that includes the home. It includes the public arena. It includes the political sphere, and it includes the church. I'm sad to say that this attitude of a man is a master has been extended to the church. There is a history that is still being written of men who try to control women in the church. There are churches who refuse to accept the authority of a female as a pastor. There are churches, and I have heard this directly from women in churches, where women, including clergy, have been sexually harassed and molested by men in the church. There are women who are told that they need to stay in certain roles because that's the way God intended it in the church. Now, I can say all of this, and you all will absorb it or blow it off as you want to. But I think I need to make something very relevant to you. Did y'all read the paper, News OK, yesterday? We talked about it at men's breakfast this morning. Sarah Roberts got a shout out in the Oklahoma News because of the influence that she has had with the Oklahoma Sooner women's softball. I don't know if you watched any of it. Whenever they did this, whenever the OU Sooner women made this sign, that was because of Sarah Roberts' influence in bringing them the story of King David and the three mighty men who accompanied him to accomplish God's will. Sarah Roberts has had a huge influence on women, not just in the state of Oklahoma. She has had a huge influence on women across the country, and that's why we are losing her to the state of Georgia, because her platform needed to be bigger. Gary had shared something with me, and I asked him if I could share some of Sarah's experience with you all, because you know Sarah. She's spoken in this church. She grew up in this church. We know her and love her and respect what she stands for, yes? This is Sarah writing. She has been turned down 3 times by 3 different churches because they would not ordain a woman. Whenever she had all of her kids, and she's got a brood, y'all. when she had her kids, she was told multiple times, don't you think you should stay home because raising kids is your first ministry? But this is what Gary shared with me last Sunday, because Sarah received this last Saturday night, not yesterday, a week ago. Well, just got my first hate mail. I'm mad I didn't screenshot it before I blocked him. A man quoted my tweet with the picture of praying with the OU softball team and told me I was damned to hell for praying with black girls. This was a man who claimed to be in the church. See, I can stand up here and I can tell you about the generals. Could have been. I can tell you that there are churches who refuse to have women as a pastor, but Sarah Roberts has been refused 3 times by 3 different churches just because she was a woman. I can tell you that women are told you need to be staying in your place in the church, but until I tell you that Sarah was told, well, now that you got kids, you need to take care of your first ministry, does it hit home? I can tell you that women are sexually harassed, but until I say she was told, you are damned to hell, I don't think you see what I'm talking about. It's still in the church. There is this attitude within the church that men are the master of this house as well as their home. And that is wrong. Oh, I know. Don't try to argue the Bible stuff with me. I know the scriptures. I know in 1 Corinthians when Paul says, well, a woman should not teach a man, she should remain silent in church. I know in Ephesians where it says a wife will submit to her husband because the man is the head of the household. I know those verses. I'm well acquainted with those verses. But let me share with you something else that Paul has said. The same Paul who said that said this, for as many of you as were baptized into Christ have put on Christ. There is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither slave nor free. There is no male or female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. That's the same Paul, by the way, who said to the Corinthian church, women, you will be silent in church and you will not teach a man, who said, men, go home and teach your women about God. How many men stand up and lead their home in spiritual leadership these days? And how many women have had to rise up and become those spiritual leaders because the man did not do his job? It was Paul who said, wives, submit to your husband, for your husband is the head of your household. But he also said, husbands, you will love your wives as Jesus Christ has loved the church, and he laid down his life and sacrificed himself for it. You will love your wives in the same way. Don't tell me what Paul says if you ain't going to say all Paul says. It is wrong to think that we segregate between men and women in the church. Those isolated passages are about a particular context in each of those churches, but this applies to all who are baptized in Christ. There is no male, there is no female. When we look at the entirety of Scripture, women stand as equal with men in the kingdom of God. This is clear as that. Queen Vashti was removed because she disobeyed her husband. She was removed because she was rebellious against her husband. She was removed because she was non-compliant to her husband. She was removed because she did not want to be another object shown off by her husband. Did y'all get that? Why did he bring her in? He wasn't proud of her. He wasn't proud of her accomplishments. He brought her in for 2 reasons. One, she was pretty. And 2, she was wearing the crown he gave her. He was showing off the crown and that which was attached to it. Because guess what happens in chapter 2? King looks around and he says, what did I do? Some smart individual comes up with an idea. Well, why don't you just get a younger, prettier model? So guess what? Esther is introduced to King Ahasuerus as a younger, prettier model. Do you think he was proud of Vashti, or was he showing her off? And she said, no. He may have written that every man is a master of his household. And that attitude that began with that decree, every man is a master of his household, has continued. But I want to say one thing. If we are a people of the New Testament, if we are the disciples of Jesus Christ, if we have been baptized into Christ, and we are one in Jesus Christ, there is only one master of everything. And that includes every one of our households. That includes the church. And that one master, that one Lord, that one king, he did just happen to be born into this world as a man. But he was more. He was not just a man. He was God and Son of God. And he was eternal. And he was beyond male and female, just as God is beyond those. His rule, though, was not established in his power. It was not established in his authority. It was not established in what he could accumulate. His rule was established in what he was willing to lay down, and that was his entire life. He laid down his life, and he sacrificed everything so that you and I could be free from sin and know life abundantly above all else. His sacrifice and the laying down of his life, that is what became the model for all men to follow. Notice I didn't say all people, because it was Paul who did say, as Christ is the head of the church, and he laid down his life for it, so you males must also lay down your life in love. As the head of a household, or in any role a man takes, he is supposed to love as Christ loved. To lay down his life, to sacrifice himself, to put the needs of others before his own needs. Women were to submit to men only because men were supposed to be Christ-like. Did you get that? Women were supposed to submit to men only when the men were being like Christ. Men, we are masters of our own homes or in the church only when we live in self-sacrificing love for anybody who occupies it. We are only the master when we are willing to lay down our lives for everyone who occupies the space where we occupy the masterhood. Women, I want you to know that you are empowered by God. Today is Pentecost. I don't know if you realize that. That's what the reds are for, by the way. It's Pentecost. See, Luana, I knew it. Today is Pentecost, when we celebrate the pouring out of the Holy Spirit on the church. Acts chapter 2, we read that story. I want to read that, just a portion of the sermon that Peter preaches during that occasion. In Acts chapter 2, beginning at verse 17. And in the last days it shall be, God declares, that I will pour out my Spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your young men shall see visions. Your old men shall dream dreams. Even on the male servant and the female servant in those days I will pour out my Spirit, and they shall prophesy. I will show the wonders in the heaven above, the signs on the earth below, blood and fire and vapor of smoke. The sun will be turned to darkness, the moon to blood, before the day of the Lord comes, the great and magnificent day. And it shall come to pass that everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord shall be saved. I will pour out my Spirit on all flesh. Women, you have the Spirit of God upon you, empowering you to be equals with men, deserving of the same love that men receive from God, deserving of the same Spirit that God has poured out on men. You are equal with men. Men, it is not our place to defend or protect women any more than it is our place to defend and protect anyone who's in the household of God. Our calling as men is not to look at women as if they were weaker or an inferior gender. Our role is not to think that we have to step in and protect them. Our place is to offer grace and love and hospitality and gentleness and care and peace and encouragement and even our very lives to raise up women just as we raise up men in our homes and in the church and in the community. This is what the Master has done for us, is it not? He laid down his life that we might be raised up, all of us. Jesus did not call just men to be his disciples. There were men and women who followed him. On that day of Pentecost, it was not just the 12 who were gathered in that upper room. We read that it was others, including the women who followed, the mother of Jesus, and those who were a part of his life. It was upon all of these, male and female, that the Holy Spirit was poured out, and they were all raised up in the Spirit as one in Christ. It is what the Master has done for us, to raise all of us up. So we men should do for all. We do not have any scriptural basis that says that we are a master of our homes if we do it for our own benefit. We do not have a scriptural basis to say that we are lords and masters within the church. What we have is a calling to lay down our lives so that all people may be brought up equally under God. Queen Vashti didn't get that chance. She was dismissed because a husband thought he was the master of his home. There's no room for the phrase, a man is a master in his own household anymore. Not among the church. For we are all one in Christ. Male and female. We are all one.